Hello and welcome back to Nathan Bell's podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe and share with your friends. Today, Nate would like to talk about sex work in disability.
Right, today I'm going to talk about whether people with severe disabilities should be able to access sex workers using their NDIS funding. Prior to the new legislation around the NDIS, people could access sex workers with their NDIS funding. Bill Shorten has come out and said that sex work will be excluded from use of NDIS funding. I disagree with that. Some people find it very taboo and they won't talk about it, and they don't understand the issue. But the reality I understand is there are people in the community with Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and serious conditions who won't find affection in their life. They won't find anyone who is willing to have sex with them. And my view is, I won't say that sex is a right. I'm not going to say that sex is a human right. I'm going to say that I'm a compassionate man and I want everyone to live good, rewarding, satisfying lives. So it upsets me to think that there are members of the community who will go the duration of their life without ever having any sexual interactions. But I know for a person with Down syndrome or a severe disability, it can be very difficult to find someone who will be willing to have intimate sexual relations with you. So I encourage the use of sex workers for people with those disabilities. And I think if we want to create a fair, compassionate society where people with severe disabilities are able to live rewarding lives, then we want to support people with those conditions to be able to access sex workers so that they can have that experience in their life. And I think people who shut this down just don't have a lot of compassion or empathy for people with those conditions. Some people with these serious disabilities live very lonely, isolated lives. I'm very compassionate. I don't want to see people in the community living isolated lives. I want people to engage in the community, and that's why in disability we talk about community engagement. It's about community engagement and it's about engaging in life. So, for someone who's not going to be able to find a sexual partner because of their severe disability, why can't the NDIS pay for them to access a prostitute? And there are specialist sex workers who work with people with these conditions, sex therapists, and there are also specialists who work with people who have been victims of severe sexual abuse, and that is the other group that I feel should be able to access sex work with the NDIS, is people with severe trauma who have been victims of severe sexual abuse, people who were raped repeatedly as children, people whose parents sexually abuse them extensively, because people like that often aren't comfortable with sexuality. And what the answer for that is, because it's no fault of their own that they were raped by their parents. It's no fault of a victim of sexual abuse if they were extensively sexually abused as a child. So the problems and traumas they have around engaging comfortably in sexual activity are not their responsibility and not their fault. So why can't the government provide a sex therapist to support them to learn how to be comfortable with sexuality? See, people who dog out policies like this, like letting people with severe trauma and disabilities use sex therapists with their NDIS, people who bag that out, they haven't really thought about the issue. And that's why I don't respect people who just bag it out. It's this, why are they spending their NDIS money on sex workers? Well, because they were raped repeatedly as a child by their parents or by some pedophile, and now they have severe trauma around sexuality, so the government's paying for them to see a sex therapist. That's why. Don't you understand? It's a simple thing. We try and help people who have trauma, and we try and help people who have severe disabilities to overcome their obstacles. But the people who bag these sorts of things out don't really understand that. I don't know whether it's because they're dumb or whether because they're psychopaths. But for some reason they can't comprehend that we should try and help people through their difficulties. When I was a child, very young, about 6 or 7 years old, my mother worked in a group home for adult men with severe disabilities. They had intellectual disabilities, they had Down syndrome and stuff, and they all lived there, and Mum was one of the carers who cared for them. So I grew up around, and I used to visit as a kid while Mum was working there, so I grew up around grown men with severe intellectual disability, so I've always been compassionate and empathetic towards that demographic. And my mother's been a disability worker my whole life. And in my mind, those men lived very isolated, lonely lives. They only had the other disabled men at the group home, and they would go on outings out in the community, and they were very much ostracised from the broader community. So, in my mind, they are absolutely eligible to see a sex therapist or a sex worker so that they can engage in that part of human life. We want to create a situation where everyone engages in human life as equal a way as possible. So absolutely, so the government has come in and said that sex work is absolutely not going to be permitted with NDIS funding. Well, I think that appeases a lot of ignorant bigots who just want to bar the NDIS full stop. And don't support it. And I don't think they understand the complexities of the issues, and I don't think they have a great deal of compassion for people living with severe disability. As I said, and it's not just people with Down syndrome and stuff, it's victims of ongoing rape and sexual abuse who require sex therapists to overcome their obstacles around sexuality. We want everyone to be able to engage in the world in a meaningful and rewarding way, and sex is a part of that, and learning to be comfortable with sexuality is a part of that. So if someone has been raped repeatedly as a child and sexually abused, the government can pay for them to access a sex therapist so they can overcome that trauma. I'm disappointed that Bill Shorten has come out and announced that sex work will be banned from the NDIS, and a number of disability advocates, I was just reading an ABC article about it, a number of disability advocates have come out and said that this is a bad step because we have severely handicapped people who won't be able to access normal things which are normal for you and are normal for me. Well, not normal for me because I certainly don't have a lot of sex. I was abused as a kid as well, and I'm not comfortable with sexuality. But normal for you and normal for most of the community, but not normal for someone with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or who has been a victim of ongoing sexual abuse. So it's all these normal people who don't know what it's like to have these obstacles and hurdles in their life that are bagging out the use of sex work under the NDIS. They don't understand the complexities of the discussion. They can't empathise with someone with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or who is a victim of rape. And I question whether it's their stupidity or whether they're just psychopaths. But really, I think I've said enough about the issue. I definitely think the government should reconsider that aspect of the changes to the NDIS legislation and what now constitutes an NDIS support. And I'll be sending this video to Bill Shorten and to the Prime Minister. I think I've been told Bill Shorten's supposedly retiring, so I may have to send it to the new Health Minister. But I'll be sending this video off to the government to voice my objection to these changes to the legislation. So there's my thoughts on whether people should be able to access sex therapists and sex workers with their NDIS funding. Drop a comment in the comment section what you think.